So now how to check that we cannot come up with a bijection between the set of natural integer n and the set R, or even better, a very tiny subset of R, which is the interval 0, 1, okay, the set of all the real numbers that are strictly greater than 0, strictly less than 1, okay? So we'll prove it for this, and since this is a tiny part of R, or we can actually find a bijection between this tiny interval and the whole set of real numbers we are going to talk about in a few minutes. Well, this would be sufficient to show that we have already a continuum in the set of real numbers between 0 and 1 and in R in general. So we don't have a discrete listing or enumeration of elements, okay? And how to prove this? Well, this is done by contradiction using a genius method called diagonalization proposed by Georg Cantor. So how to do this? So we have to suppose that such a mapping exists. Okay, let's suppose that we have such a mapping. I need a white space to write. Okay, so I will write beside it. So assume that 0 to 1 is countably infinite. It means that you can find a certain mapping, F, magical F. You can make wild guesses and come up with this mapping going from this interval to the set of natural integers or vice versa. Okay, don't worry. So usually we use this notation. So logically, for every integer here, you can find a certain real number here. Let's call it R0. And for 1, you can find R1, and so on and so forth. For k, you can map it to the real number k, and so on and so forth. Okay, so suppose that there exists such a bijection between those two different sets. Okay, and let's try to find a contradiction. Okay, so let's try to think about the nature of those numbers. Okay, so these are real numbers that are strictly greater than 0, strictly less than 1. So it's totally fine if you allow me to write them in this way. I would say that R0 is equal to 0 point. So I don't care about the nature of the function. Just let me make wild guesses that it's equal to 0 point, a certain digit, 0, 0, another digit, 0, 1, a third one, 0, 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. Well, what are these digits? These are decimal digits. So any Dij is one of those simple digits going from the 0 to 9. Okay, good. So it could be, for example, 0 0.000. Okay, we can talk about it. 0.1111. So these are easy numbers. 0.1, 2, 3, 4 up to 9, then 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 9, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we can talk about any certain configuration of digits. Okay, it depends on your function f. Don't forget. So what about R1? Well, I will be able to also write it in this way as 0. D10, D11, D12, and so on and so forth. And I can continue doing this indefinitely. So I have RK, it's completely fine, or yeah, let's use RK. It's equal to D K0, DK1, and so on and so forth, up to DKK, and it continues after that. Okay. Of course, there are plenty of those elements, though. There is an infinite number of those elements. It's just an enumeration of those real numbers. Okay, so here comes the trick of Cantor, the diagonalization. So let's consider the sequence of digits. Okay, this particular sequence of digits. I'm going to define a new real number, RD. I'm going to call it RD, R on the diagonal. It's outside of this list, maybe. I don't know. And that is equal to 0 D00. So I'll compose it out of those numbers on the diagonal. So by the way, the diagonal also goes indefinitely in this way. I'm sorry. Okay. So the first digit in RD is zero is D00. The second digit after the radix is D11. The third one is D22, and so on and so forth, up to DKK, and so on and so forth. Okay, good. This is a real number. So you might already argue that this number does not belong to this list, but suppose like that it is equal to one of those numbers here. So it's already taken into account by the function f, and it's actually equal to certain rj. Okay, so don't worry. Maybe this number exists. But so why we are worried about this? Because you suppose that you can come up with a bijection, okay? So that every natural number is mapped to certain rk here, okay? So rd, it's maybe most probably because your bijection is almost perfect, so it should be one of those numbers here. I can find that there exists a certain number j such that rd is equal to rj, okay? It must be the case a priori, given the solid definition of your function, bijective function. Good, but I can challenge you now with another number that by construction, by definition, I will call it Rd prime, and I will compose it in the following way. I will put the first element after the radix to be D00 prime. And I will make sure that it's different than D00. So no matter what D00 was, suppose it was a 0, I will pick up 1 here, or 2, or 3, any other number. I have plenty of choices, by the way. So just any digit that is different than D00. And instead of D11, I will consider another digit, D11 prime, that is different than D11. Again, if D11 was equal to 3, let's say, or 2, then I would pick up anything other than 2, okay? 7, let's say. So, and I will keep doing this, okay? I will also pick up DKK prime that is different than DKK, okay? D22 prime that is different than D22. So I think you got the idea. Why I'm doing this? Well, it's totally legal to construct this element. By the way, this element belongs to 0, 1, if you allow me to write this way. I think you agree because it's 0 point something, so it's less than 1, greater than 0. Nevertheless, RT prime cannot be equal to any of those RIs here. Why? Because let's think about it. So can't be the case that RD prime is equal to R0. Well, I don't think so, because even if D prime 1, 1 happens to be perfectly equal to D0, 1, D prime 2, 2 happens to be equal to this digit, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, I made sure, absolutely sure, that D00 prime is different than D00. So I made sure that at least one digit in RT prime is different than one digit in R0 to see the magic. Okay, so I'll repeat. By construction, I defined RD prime to be the decimal number that exists between 0 and 1. So it's 0 point something, certain sequence of digits. And where the digits are composed as follows. They are each digit number, II, is completely different than the original digit in those RIs, okay, on the diagonal of those RIs. So this is why RD prime is different than R0. So since simply D00 is different than D00 prime. So at least one digit is different between these two real numbers. I think you guessed what I would be doing. So RD prime is also different than R1, and it's also different than RK, and so on and so forth. So once again, because I'm always having one element, one digit in the um, um value of RD prime that is different than exactly one digit in every single one of those three numbers. And hence, I just showed you that there exists a number actually um, that is not mapped to any natural number in N. So I just show you that I can come up with this RD prime that is not mapped to any natural number here. Okay, so I showed you by contradiction that this bijective function cannot exist. Okay, so please pause the video, get back to what we just said, or try to reproduce it on a piece of paper and to convince yourself with it. It takes a bit of time, but I'm quite sure that you will be able to reproduce it. And why did we do it just for 0 to 1, the interval 0 to 1? Well, because we can define a bijection between the interval 0 to 1 and the whole set of real numbers R. That is this function here, and still map every single uh, uh, real number actually that you have to a certain value between 0 and 1. Okay, so this is why you can accommodate an infinity of numbers between any two different real numbers. Okay, so you see this, if we recall the hotel example, this like not only one way growth, but also um, at any place you can also have an infinity of growth between any two different successive elements. Okay, so this makes your elements uncountable, not enumerable. So you cannot list them, you cannot enumerate them. And this is why we say that the size of this set R is called the continuum and is denoted by C. Okay. Well, we have another example to show you about another set that is uncountable. Well, it's the power set of n. Its size is equal to, by convention, to 2 to the power of the size of n, but it happens that the size of n is not an integer, it's the aleph now. But it's also denoted in this way because it's the um, you know it already, there is an exponential number of possibilities for the elements that will make it to P of n if your original size is equal to the size of n. Okay, so how to prove that you cannot find a bijection between the set of integers and the power set of the set of integers? Okay, so maybe we have to try to enumerate those elements in P of n. So if we want to do it gradually, we can think about the empty set in P of n, all the singletons, 1, 2, but already this sequence never ends. But even if you succeed on finishing it, so you have to also talk about pairs of elements or sets of size 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, and so on and so forth. That never ends. And then 2, well, 2, 1 is already there, but 2, 3, 2, 4, and so on, and never ends, and so on and so forth, up to the whole set, and finally the set composed out of 0, 1, 2, 3 to the infinite. Okay, so you also see that there are plenty of elements in there, and this is a potential to be uncountable. So you cannot actually enumerate all of those elements in the set. Okay, but let's suppose we can do it. Okay, let's suppose that to denote a certain element of P of n, we're going to use a sequence of zeros and ones. Okay, as for example, the empty set, we can denote it by the sequence 0, 0, 0, and so on and so forth. as if it was false, 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 to say that the integer 0 is not present in this subset, 1 is not an element of this subset, 2 is not an element of this subset, and so on and so forth. So just to talk about the total absence of all the elements of n, but of course we have an infinite sequence already here, okay? We can also denote, for example, the set of even numbers with 1, 0, 1, 0, and so on and so forth, because 0 is an element here, 1 is absent in this subset of n, 2 is present, 3 is absent, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we can use those sequences of zeros, infinite sequences of zeros and ones, to denote every single subset of the set of natural integers n. Okay, good. How this can be useful to prove that we cannot find such a bijection. So let's say you could find it. So you could map 0 to a certain element here in P of n, and let's call this element A0, okay? 1 to A1, and so on and so forth. So your elements of P of n, okay, would be denoted by those sequences. So suppose that A0 is equal to digit 0, 0, digit 0, 1, digit 0, 2, and so on and so forth. Where in this time, in this example, Dij belongs to this set 0, 1 only. Okay, so to define those sequences, we can only use 0 or 1 to denote that the corresponding integer 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth are present or not in the corresponding set. Okay, so suppose that behind this sequence there is a set called A0 that is a subset of n, and that is an element in P of n. Okay, good. So we can also use another sequence to define another subset of n. Let's call it A1. Corresponds to the sequence D10, D11, D12, and so on and so forth, where every Dij is again a 0 or a 1 to denote that the corresponding integer in the set n is present or not in this subset A1. We can do this for any subset AK, and you will obtain a certain sequence of digits dk0, dk1, dk2, and so on and so forth, up to dkk and even further. So suppose you came up with this enumeration of all the subsets of n. Well, I can still beat you in the same counter trick way. Okay, so I will form a new set. Okay, called a diagonal that is equivalent to the sequence a diagonal, composed out of the digits, binary digits, by the way, because they are either 0 or 1, d0, d0, d11, d22, so on, dkk, and so on and so forth. So I'll pick up all those digits on the diagonal, and I will form a new subset, okay, that corresponds to this sequence. So they will be either zeros or ones, and this will create a certain subset of n. Again, maybe this subset is one of those sets here. I don't know. Okay, we don't need to argue about this. Okay, suppose it's one of them, and it has been magically considered by your function, bijective function f. But we can form the following challenge to the author of this function f. We are going to define a new sequence that will create a subset AD prime. This sequence will have D0, 0 bar actually. So I can, instead of using something different, I can use this complement notation, because if D0, 0 was equal to 0, well, I will put 1 here. And if D11 was equal to 1, well, I will put 0 here, and vice versa. Okay, so I will consider a new sequence composed out of the complement, binary complement of all those digits. Okay, and now, well, this set, or this sequence, denotes a subset of n. So it's undeniable that it is a subset of n, because it simply contains certain element of n and does not contain other elements of n. So it is a subset of n. Nevertheless, this subset cannot be any of those subsets here, because at least, um, so it's different than the set A0, because at least one of the elements that were in A0 are no more in AD prime, or vice versa. Maybe this one was 0, so an element that was not originally at A0, now I'm adding it and I'm forming AD prime. Okay, so do you see the point? So finally, AD prime cannot be equal to this set A0, okay, nor A1, and so on and so forth. So it's different than all of them. And it means that the so-called bijective function that we pretended to have is not finally bijective. It didn't map this set to any integer in N. So since there is no bijection between n and p of n, then clearly p of n is an uncountable set. It is uncountably infinite. Good. Um, so you can read the details in the slides, and here comes the final summary. So sets are of two kinds, finite or infinite. Infinite sets are of two kinds, countably infinite or uncountable. But this also gives us something, that countable sets are of two kinds, either finite or countably infinite. Okay, so because even finite sets, they are countable, they are enumerable, we can count them. Simply we stop at a specific number n. Here we do not stop at all. We can always come up with something else, something new. But with uncountable sets, uh, we cannot enumerate the elements at the first place. Good. So another summary. A finite set, you should find a certain integer n such that you can define a bijection between this set here, the set of integers between 0 and n minus 1, and your set A. In this case, your set cardinality is set to be equal to n. For countably infinite sets, you should find a bijection between your set and the set of natural integers. In this case, the size of your set is believed or agreed on to be called equal to aleph null. And if you cannot find the bijection with n, then most probably you need the set R to accommodate all of the elements that you have in your set, okay, or a subset of R. But in this case, any tiny interval, such as the interval between 0 and 1, is already uncountable, okay, and its size is defined to be the continuum, and it's not a number once again. Thank you for listening. And just in case you have any questions, please feel free to send them written or recorded with a tiny video uploaded on Moodle forum. And I hope you enjoyed this set of videos. Now I think you are ready to work on all the exercises of the last set of practice exercises. So please work on them and finish them by the end of the weekend so that we can start working on new material by the beginning of the next week.